Have you ever wondered why some people seem cold, distant, or hard to love, even when you try to get close? It's not always what it seems. Beneath that surface lies a story of pain so deep it's reshaped how it exists. And according to Carl Jung, it's a story most of us miss. Pain doesn't just hurt, it transforms, turning vulnerability into armor, trust into doubt, and connection into caution. In this video, we'll uncover the hidden behaviors of those who've suffered too much, why they act the way they do, and how their unconscious wounds whisper through every guarded word or silent retreat. You need to watch this to the end, because it's not just about understanding them, it's about seeing yourself. Are you carrying armor you don't even recognize? Could that wall you've built be keeping out more than just pain? We'll explore Jung's insights on turning suffering into awareness, decoding the psyche's defenses, and finding a path to real healing. Stick with me, because by the end, you'll not only feel less guilt for your struggles, but gain the compassion to bridge the gaps pain creates for yourself and others. If you haven't subscribed to our channel yet, please click the subscribe button and ring the notification bell to stay updated on all our latest content. Some people aren't cold, they're simply protecting a heart that has been broken in places most can't see. Others aren't difficult to love, they've just learned, often the hard way, that love can sometimes arrive wearing a sweet smile, but leave with a wound so deep it echoes for years. What many of us are quick to label as complicated, emotionally unavailable, or too intense are often just the visible layers of someone's emotional survival strategy. These behaviors, these patterns, these so-called flaws, are not character defects, they are shields, carefully and painfully crafted over time, built thread by thread through silent nights of holding back tears and trying to make sense of pain that never got a chance to be named. I truly believe we, as a society, have misunderstood the language of suffering. We see silence and call it indifference. We see distance and assume arrogance. But we miss the heart behind the armor, the soul still aching beneath the surface, quietly screaming for safety. When pain doesn't have room to breathe, to be seen, to be heard, it doesn't just disappear, it burrows deep, turning into defense mechanisms that feel like personality traits but are trauma wrapped in behavior. Over time, we forget we're even wearing armor. It feels like skin, but it isn't. It's protection necessary once, but suffocating now. Carl Jung, in his profound wisdom, once said that pain is the currency with which the soul pays for more consciousness. That truth has sat with me for years. He didn't glamorize pain, nor did he encourage people to seek suffering. What he offered was a deeper understanding. Pain, when acknowledged with tenderness and curiosity, can be a mirror, one that not only reflects where we were broken, but also where we've forgotten to truly live. I've felt it myself, those quiet, aching places inside me that didn't need fixing, just witnessing. The behaviors that grow from suffering, overthinking, withdrawing, shutting down, pushing others away, are not signs of weakness or dysfunction. They are signs of the ego doing everything it can to keep the soul functioning, even when it's buried beneath emotional rubble. People who have carried deep wounds develop coping strategies so complex, so deeply woven into their identity, they often don't even realize they're operating from pain. They think it's just who they are. But it's not random. None of it is. The way someone flinches at affection, the way they scan your tone for disappointment, the way they retreat after opening up, it's not because they want to push you away. It's because somewhere deep inside, a part of them still doesn't believe they're safe. That kind of pain teaches people to anticipate harm, even in moments of peace, and we judge them for it. We judge the overreaction, the coldness, the intensity, the way they shut down. But to judge these behaviors is like staring at a scar and forgetting there was once a wound so painful it left a mark for life. There is another way, though, a softer way, a more human way. Instead of asking, "What's wrong with you?" we must begin asking, "What happened to you?" That simple shift in perspective is where healing begins, because every so-called overreaction is often a wound reactivating. The soul doesn't want pity, it longs to be understood, to be seen. And in that sacred act of being seen without judgment, something inside begins to soften. When we stop trying to fix people and start trying to understand them, defenses that once felt like concrete begin to melt. The ego, no longer under constant threat, can finally take a breath. And in that breath we find the first flicker of healing. It's not about erasing the pain. Some pain never leaves it, just changes shape. It reorganizes itself inside us. It learns to whisper instead of scream, but only if we're willing to listen. Carl Jung called these emotional wounds complexes, not flaws. Not disorders, but psychic structures that live inside us and protect us when we feel unsafe. And they make so much sense. If someone was deeply rejected as a child, not always through abuse, sometimes just through neglect, coldness, or being emotionally ignored, they may carry that rejection into every future interaction. Not because they want to, but because the body remembers, even when the mind forgets. Imagine someone who grew up with emotional absence. Maybe their parents were there in body, but never in presence. Maybe their feelings were dismissed, their fears laughed off, their sadness ignored. That child grows up, learning that emotional connection is unreliable, that closeness might hurt, and that love doesn't always mean safety. Fast forward 20 years, and suddenly a delayed reply, a blank stare, or a moment of perceived distance feels like a dagger. Not because the present is unsafe, but because the past never stopped echoing. This is why some people cry for no reason, spiral after a small misunderstanding, or feel abandoned after a missed call. It's not irrational. It's deeply rational in the emotional map they carry. Their nervous system isn't overreacting, it's reacting exactly as it was trained to. These aren't dramatic people. They are sensitive souls, holding in more pain than the world has ever acknowledged. I've seen people, beautiful, brilliant people, live in constant fear that they are too much, when in reality, they've just had to feel too much for too long. And when these emotional cores, these inner complexes get triggered, they hijack the entire system. The person becomes someone else, someone scared, someone reactive, and often they don't even understand why. But the body knows. The body always knows. Healing doesn't come from suppressing these parts of us. It comes from giving them space to speak, from sitting with the discomfort and asking it gently, "What are you trying to protect me from?" That's how awareness is born. Awareness doesn't delete the complex, but it takes away its secret power. Suddenly, instead of being owned by our past, we begin to own our story. Distrust, for example, is so often mistaken for bitterness or coldness, but it's not. It's the soul's memory of being betrayed in the very place it once felt safest. Trusting again after that is not a small thing, it is a radical act of bravery. When the unconscious is wounded, it doesn't differentiate between the past and the present. It reacts to patterns, to feelings, to symbols. It prepares for pain before it arrives, just in case. That's what hypervigilance is, not paranoia, but protection. Sometimes that distrust comes from betrayal, other times from being overlooked, dismissed, or silenced. What matters isn't the size of the wound, but the depth of the impact. And so, the ego begins to build defenses, hyper-analyzing tone, questioning motives, expecting disappointment. It doesn't wait to be hurt again, it predicts it, just to stay a step ahead. And in doing so, it often sabotages the very thing it wants most: love, connection, trust. The people who live this way don't want to. But the truth is, they'd rather be alone than risk being shattered again. So they filter every kind word, every gesture of love, through suspicion. because believing might mean being betrayed, and they're just not sure they can survive that again. Jung understood this profoundly. He knew the psyche isn't cruel, it's protective. The ego distrusts because it once trusted too much and paid the price. But over time, that protection begins to steal life from us. Because no matter how much we long for intimacy, we can't receive it with walls up. Healing, real healing, begins the moment we realize that what we're reacting to isn't the now, it's the echo of the then. It takes soul-deep courage to pause in the middle of an emotional storm and ask, is this fear from the past or a real danger now? Trusting again doesn't mean ripping down all our defenses. It means allowing gentle moments of reality to touch our hearts. It means letting someone in, one heartbeat at a time, while reminding ourselves that this moment is not the past. The person in front of me is not the one who hurt me, and I am not that same scared child anymore. I have the power to choose a different response, and in that choice, however small, healing begins. Distrust is not some careless error in judgment. It is a deeply intelligent response formed by the soul in the face of betrayal, abandonment, and heartbreak. It's not a flaw. It's a strategy. It's a lesson carved into the psyche by pain too overwhelming to process in the moment. To me, distrust has never looked like coldness. It has always looked like a wound that learned to cover itself. When the ego is still bracing for attack, still reliving the betrayals of yesterday, it stays on high alert. But something beautiful happens. When the ego begins to recognize that it is no longer at war, that the battleground is now quiet, and that the present is not the enemy. Slowly, with time and tenderness, it begins to soften. It begins to rest. There are moments in life, some of us know them all too well, when the inner world caves in. Trust crumbles like old stone, and the people we thought were safe suddenly feel like threats. During those times, pain doesn't just knock on the door, it moves in. It sits beside us, in the dark. And in moments like those, isolation doesn't come as a decision, it emerges like breath after drowning. The soul recoils instinctively, not out of pride or manipulation, but because to remain open feels like exposing raw skin to burning wind. So the shutting down begins. The walls go up, not visible ones, but internal fortresses built out of silence, suspicion, and distance. And from the outside, this looks like coldness, indifference, maybe even arrogance. But if you could see the view from the inside, you'd realize that this isolation is not apathy, it's a psychic womb, a place the soul retreats to when everything else has become unbearable. There, in the darkness, in that lonely silence, the soul does not give up. It tries to reorganize. It tries to remember who it is, without the story of betrayal, without the noise of others' expectations. Jung understood this so well. He didn't see this retreat as a weakness. He saw it as symbolic of death and rebirth, a folding inward that precedes a return to life. The shadow doesn't retreat because it has lost hope. It retreats because it is trying to protect something sacred until it's strong enough to face the world again. And sometimes, the only language we can speak from that space is silence. A silence that isn't emptiness, but a signal, I'm not ready yet. I'm still healing, but here's where it gets complicated. What starts as a protective pause can quietly turn into a lifelong pattern. The refuge morphs into a prison. What once saved us becomes what suffocates us. The soul forgets how to reach out and how to ask for help. The heart, still beating, begins to live behind locked doors, and one day, no one even knows where the key is, anymore, not even us. That's why awareness matters so much. We don't need to force healing. We don't need to rush our way out of isolation. But we do need to be honest. We need to admit to ourselves, yes, I pulled away to survive, but maybe I don't have to be alone anymore. That kind of truth is soft but strong. It doesn't demand that the armor be thrown off it. simply begins loosening it, one clasp at a time. And then something incredible happens. That isolating silence begins to shift into sacred solitude. Solitude is where the heart can breathe again, where the soul doesn't feel so trapped, where being alone no longer feels like punishment, but like presence. And from that place of grounded solitude, reconnection becomes possible, not just with others, but with ourselves. It won't be the same as before. It will be more honest, more guarded perhaps, but more authentic. And those who have known true disconnection, those who have had to claw their way back from silence, know exactly when it's finally safe to open the door, even if just an inch. You see, some people seem so solid, so certain. They move through life with this air of control and confidence, like they've figured it all out. But behind that polished exterior is often a child who learned far too early that softness wasn't allowed, that vulnerability invited harm. Donald Winnicott spoke about this beautifully. The false self children create when their authentic needs go unmet. It's not deception, it's adaptation. When crying brings no comfort, the child learns to stop crying. When emotions are unwelcome, they vanish from the surface. And what begins as protection becomes persona, the carefully managed image we show the world. Jung called it the mask. We all wear one. It's part of being human. But for those who've suffered deeply, that mask is no longer just a tool. It becomes a cage, a beautifully constructed, socially acceptable, utterly suffocating golden cage. The persona performs strength, control, and certainty. But inside, the soul is quietly screaming, "Who am I? If I could just be." The danger isn't in the persona itself. It's in identifying with it too much. It becomes the only thing we show, the only way we relate. And people start to believe it, even we start to believe it. But those of us who've suffered know the truth. That mask is armor. Necessary once? Yes. But now, it's the very thing that keeps love out. People who've experienced abandonment, rejection, or humiliation often don't feel safe showing who they truly are. So they performed. They look composed. They stay poised. They become the fixer, the caretaker, the one who has it all together. And no one realizes that behind that flawless exterior is someone dying to be held. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons helpful, please comment number 1 below to let me know that you are still watching this video with me. But eventually, thank God, something starts to crack. The soul can't hide anymore. The weight of the mask becomes too much. The loneliness gets louder than the performance. And the question shifts from, how do I look, to, who am I? That's where healing begins. Not by destroying the persona, but by realizing we don't need it all the time. Real strength isn't about being untouched by life. It's about allowing others to see your cracks and standing tall anyway. And empathy? Real empathy isn't always born from noble understanding. Sometimes it's born from unresolved sorrow. I know this one too well. People who have felt the sharp edge of pain often become hyper-attuned to the pain of others. They can sense it before it's spoken. They notice the trembling voice, the averted gaze, the change in tone. At first, this looks like a gift, and it is. But if left unchecked, it becomes a way to avoid one's pain, a way to stay distracted from our wounds by trying to heal everyone else. We start overgiving. We make others our mission. We lose ourselves in the caretaking, not because we're saints, but because somewhere inside, we're still hoping that if we can make others feel seen, maybe someone will finally see us too. So many people carry this silent burden, the identity of the strong one, the helper, the one who always holds it together. And slowly, invisibly, they erase themselves. They become the emotional glue holding everyone else's pieces while silently falling apart inside. But it doesn't have to be this way. Healing asks us to stop performing, to stop escaping into others, and to turn inward gently, lovingly, and ask, what about me? What do I need right now? Where is my pain hiding? Because when we finally listen to that inner cry, the one that's been buried under years of silence, survival, and performance, we don't just begin to heal. We begin to live. Behind the endless giving, behind the tireless care for others, there often hides something few can see, a quiet, unconscious attempt to avoid one's descent. Because let's be honest, diving into someone else's pain often feels safer than facing our own. It gives us a sense of purpose, usefulness, and emotional direction. But sometimes that very direction becomes a distraction, a beautifully disguised escape route from what remains unresolved inside. I've witnessed this in others, and painfully, in myself too. It's so easy to feel like you're helping, when deep down, you're just running from your grief, your emptiness, your own unmet needs. Carl Jung helps us peel back this illusion through his concept of projection. When we cannot face something within ourselves, whether it's sadness, fear, guilt, or a haunting sense of inadequacy, we unconsciously cast it onto others. In the case of excessive empathy, we don't just feel for people, we feel through them. Their pain becomes a mirror for our own, and in attempting to heal them, we're unknowingly trying to tend to the wound within ourselves that we've avoided for far too long. Yes, that projection creates a connection, a deep emotional bond, but it also drains us, because no relationship, no matter how loving, can thrive when one person gives endlessly while forgetting to hold space for their soul. That's where burnout comes in, not just physical exhaustion, but soul exhaustion, a weariness that seeps into the bones, a quiet ache from constantly overextending your heart. The person on the outside might look like the strong empath, the nurturing friend, the compassionate partner, but inside, they're fraying. They feel too much, too often, and without realizing it, they fall into patterns where they give endlessly while the other simply takes. And that's not love. That's not balance. That's emotional codependency, dressed up as sensitivity. Healing begins with a subtle but seismic shift. It starts the moment we realize that feeling deeply for others should never come at the cost of forgetting ourselves. True empathy doesn't require self-abandonment. It requires self-awareness. You can't truly hold space for someone else's pain if you've never created space for your own. You can't lead others out of their storm when you're secretly drowning in your own. Helping someone doesn't mean carrying their burdens. It means walking beside them, hand in hand, without letting go of your truth. Real empathy is born, not in self-erasure, but in self-integration. It arises once the pain inside us has been acknowledged, honored, and held with tenderness. Then, and only then, does our compassion become steady, rooted, unshakable. It doesn't overwhelm me. It doesn't try to fix. It simply stays, quiet, humble, deeply human. And that kind of presence? That's the kind that heals not just others, but ourselves too. To love again, after being hurt, is not a light-hearted endeavor. It's not a casual act. It's a pilgrimage. Every time someone who's been wounded opens their heart, even a little, it's an act of immense courage. It's not about a lack of desire, it's about the overflow of memory. Every attempt to trust carries the invisible weight of betrayal. Every gesture of affection is filtered through layers of doubt. And even when the person in front of you is kind, safe, and sincere, there's still a voice whispering, "But what if they hurt me too?" Affection comes, yes, but it comes armored. Love grows, but cautiously. Bonds form, but they're watched, measured, guarded. It's not a lack of feeling. It's too much feeling, too many echoes of what once shattered us. The soul remembers the sting of abandonment, the ache of disappointment, the shock of betrayal. And so the heart steps forward, but never all the way. The ego, like a tired, bruised soldier, keeps a hand on the shield, always waiting for the next blow. Jung knew that relationships are where our deepest wounds come alive. Intimacy is the theater where our unconscious scripts are played out. That's why love can feel so terrifying to those who've suffered. It's not just about connecting with another, it's about confronting every wound we've carried. And often, those who have suffered love with only half of themselves, because the other half is still waiting for the escape hatch. They have one foot in and one foot poised to run. Not because they want to leave, but because they never really learned how to stay. This cautious stance may feel like protection, but it gradually erodes the connection. True intimacy, real soul-level connection, requires vulnerability, and vulnerability can't breathe through armor. It asks for presence, for the willingness to distinguish between the past and the present, for the honesty to say, this fear belongs to yesterday, and I won't let it poison today. The person we're with now is not the one who broke us, but the wounded psyche, unless healed, doesn't make that distinction. It paints every new love with the colors of the past. Jung wisely said that true love begins where projection ends. Until we stop projecting our trauma, our fears, and our insecurities onto the people we love, we'll never be able to truly see them. And if we can't see them, we can't love them, not really. Without that awareness, love becomes a battlefield, not of two people, but of two histories colliding. Instead of setting us free, the relationship becomes a source of stress, hypervigilance, of emotional chaos. But healing is possible. It doesn't happen in a flash. It's slow, quiet, earned. It happens when we stop and ask ourselves in the heat of a moment, am I reacting to what's happening now or to what happened then? That kind of awareness can change everything. Trust doesn't ask us to jump. It invites us to lean gently over time, to recognize that not every love ends in loss. Not every touch brings pain. That sometimes, just sometimes, the person in front of us is not a threat, but a gift. And when that truth finally begins to sink in, the armor we once clung to so desperately no longer needs to be torn off, it simply dissolves, because it's no longer necessary. Some people walk through life carrying unspeakable weight quietly. They don't complain. They don't ask for help. They're seen as strong, resilient, and dependable. But here's what few realize. That strength wasn't born from comfort. It was born from survival. When no one showed up, they learned to walk alone. And they kept walking, even when their legs trembled, even when they were breaking inside. The strength of someone who's truly suffered doesn't show up in big declarations. It lives in the small, silent ways they show up again and again. It's not loud. It's not polished. It's not performative. It's real. It's raw. It's the kind of strength that comes from falling over and over and still getting back up, from standing on trembling knees, because collapsing simply isn't an option. It's a quiet strength, but it's the kind that holds up the world. Jung understood this. He knew that suffering, when it doesn't destroy us, awakens something deep and sacred, a kind of inner search that pulls us toward the truest part of ourselves. The pain becomes a teacher, not one we asked for, but one that leads us back to our essence. And once we begin to walk that path of truth, of healing, of reclamation, we begin to realize that the goal is not to be unbreakable. The goal is to be whole, not perfect, not invincible, just whole, just human. When everything outside begins to crumble, when life feels like it's dissolving at the edges, when every pillar you've leaned on begins to sway, there's often something somewhere deep within that insists on continuing. It doesn't shout. It doesn't scream. It simply whispers, keep going. Even when there's no evidence that a path remains, when the horizon is obscured by darkness, this quiet inner voice emerges from the depths. It's not the ego that part is too exhausted, too afraid. It's something far more ancient and enduring. It's the self, the soul, the eternal spark that somehow survives even when everything else breaks. That is the sacred part of us that holds steady when the rest of us can't. I've felt that whisper myself in my darkest nights, and it was never loud, but it was unwavering. But here's what we rarely talk about. When that strength becomes the only thing we know, when it isn't met with gentleness, softness, and love, it begins to morph. It becomes rigid and calcified. The soul, having learned to survive at all costs, starts to lose its ability to surrender. It forgets how to rest. It forgets how to be held. And after carrying so much for so long, the idea of showing pain feels like betrayal, like undoing the very strength that got you this far. That's the tragedy of unbalanced strength. It turns into armor, not just against the world, but against the self. You learn to carry everything alone and then feel guilty the moment you consider asking for help. So you stay silent. You keep walking, and the world keeps calling you strong, while inside you're barely holding on. But real strength, the kind that heals, not just survives, needs to walk hand in hand with vulnerability. True strength doesn't mean being invincible. It means knowing when to stop. It means knowing when you can finally say, "I can't do this alone anymore," and trusting that you won't fall apart when you say it. It means finding the courage to lay down the sword and allow someone safe to hold space for you. When the soul begins to realize it doesn't have to fight anymore, a new strength is born, not survival strength, but conscious strength. This kind of strength doesn't build walls, it builds bridges. It doesn't carry pain like proof, it carries it like a story, remembered, honored, but no longer controlling. And it's in that moment of internal permission, you don't have to carry it all alone anymore, that the path stops being so lonely, even if it remains quiet. Some people live more in their heads than in their hearts or bodies. They think endlessly, analyzing every word, replaying conversations, imagining infinite futures, scripting outcomes. On the surface, it looks like intelligence, but often, it's fear of wearing a thoughtful mask. It's a strategy developed by a psyche that learned somewhere along the way that feeling is dangerous. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons helpful, please comment number 2 below to let me know that you are still watching this video with me. When your emotions have brought more pain than peace, when your tenderness has been met with dismissal or betrayal, the mind begins to take over. Emotions are messy and unpredictable, so the ego says, let's keep everything in here, in the realm of logic and understanding. Let's make it make sense, so we don't have to feel it. And it works, for a while. But over time, that safety comes with a cost. Emotional spontaneity begins to fade. Intuition gets muted. The body becomes secondary to the intellect, and the heart, too wild and unpredictable, is left out of the equation. Jung warned us of this trap. He said knowledge alone is not transformation. Knowing is not enough. We must live, and to live fully, we must feel even when it hurts. Excessive reflection is the ego's clever trick to suspend pain in midair, to prevent it from sinking in. But what isn't felt can't be integrated, and what isn't integrated continues to act in the shadows. I've seen so many people, myself included, trapped in cycles of understanding. They know exactly why they hurt. They can trace the wound to childhood, explain the triggers, identify the pattern, but they're still stuck because the healing never reached the body. It never touched the raw, tender parts that don't respond to explanation, only to presence. Thinking feels safe. The feeling does not. That's the unconscious logic. But here's the paradox. Only feeling brings change. Only when pain is allowed to move through the body, through tears, silence, breath, can it begin to settle. And that doesn't mean getting lost in suffering. It means allowing space for what is to be felt. It means not hiding behind theories when your soul is crying for compassion. Healing isn't about thinking less. It's about letting thought walk beside emotion. It's about letting the body speak its truth, letting tears fall without apology, letting silence linger without rushing to fill it. That doesn't make us weak, it makes us real. When thought becomes a companion, not a guard, it can return to its true role, to bring insight, not isolation. And that's when the soul begins to realize that feeling is not a threat, it's a sign that you're alive. There is a sensitivity that life can't teach in gentle ways. It's born through pain. People who have truly suffered often carry with them a rare warmth, an intuitive presence. They listen in a way that makes others feel seen. They sense what others can't articulate. They feel pain in others because they've tasted it themselves. Jung called these people wounded healers, echoing the archetype of Chiron, the wise centaur, wounded yet gifted with the ability to heal others. But this archetype carries a hidden complexity. The ability to soothe others doesn't always come from a healed place. It often comes from an open wound. The impulse to care can be a beautiful thing, but it can also be a distraction, a way to avoid tending to our pain by immersing ourselves in someone else's. We become bridges to others, but forget to walk back home to ourselves. This is the shadow side of the wounded healer, the temptation to lose yourself in service to others, to postpone your healing for the sake of appearing strong, reliable, and indispensable. Over time, this turns into self-forgetting. You become the one everyone leans on, yet you feel invisible, loved, but not known. And Jung understood this. He knew the psyche seeks balance. He knew that when caring becomes exhausting, when the act of helping comes with hidden resentment or quiet depletion, something is off. The archetype is out of alignment. Healing, in this case, doesn't mean withdrawing love. It means including yourself in the circle of care. It means recognizing that another's pain is valid, but so is yours. That you can hold space without holding the entire burden. That presence is not the same as sacrifice. True healing begins when the wound becomes awareness, not identity. When care becomes a conscious choice, not a compulsion. When we stop trying to rescue and start simply being with, not because we need to fix someone, but because we've learned to sit with our ouch, and in doing so, we've developed the wisdom to respect someone else's. And then there's the idea that expecting less is maturity. I used to believe that lowering my expectations somehow made me wiser, more grounded, and more resilient. But now I see that sometimes it's just a disguise, a shield. When someone has been disappointed too many times, lied to, dismissed, betrayed, hope becomes dangerous. So the heart begins to armor itself. Expect nothing, it says, and you won't be hurt. But that isn't maturity. That's protection. It's fear dressed up as stoicism. It's pain that's never been processed. This self-protective approach might keep you safe from pain, but it also cuts you off from life, from joy, from awe, from dreaming freely. Relationships become shallow. Excitement is muted by caution. Every moment of hope is shadowed by suspicion. And slowly, joy becomes something we observe, not something we allow ourselves to feel. But Jung said the soul longs for expansion, and that's the truth I keep returning to. The soul doesn't want to shrink itself to avoid risk. It wants to experience, to create, to love. Deep down, even after all the heartbreak, even under all the fear, there is still a part of us that wants to trust again, that wants to believe. And that part? That's the part that heals us. When someone has been deeply disappointed, when life has shown them one too many times that it can't be trusted, that dreams often wither before they can even take root, the instinct is to pull back, not because they don't want more, not because the heart has lost all hope, but because it's not sure it can handle another fall. After being let down repeatedly, how can you not brace for impact? This instinctive retreat is not weakness, it is self-preservation. It is an emotional armor, carefully constructed to protect a fragile, wounded spirit, to keep the heart from shattering into pieces that it may not be able to glue back together. It's important to remember this. It's not a weakness, it's defense. It's the psyche's way of holding itself together when the very fabric of trust has been torn. But the danger lies in when this mechanism hardens, when the walls become too solid, too permanent. Life starts to slip through those cracks, happening only halfway. The joy, the possibilities, the beauty, everything gets filtered through a lens of fear. And anything that lies outside of your control, anything that might open you up again, is seen as a potential threat, a risk you can't afford to take. Becoming aware of this pattern is the first crucial step in softening it. Healing does not demand you return to blind hope, to that naive belief that everything will be okay no matter what. Healing begins when you allow hope to exist again, but without the need for certainty. It means you can desire, you can dream, without the fear of crumbling into pieces when those desires aren't realized. Opening your heart again does not mean exposing it recklessly, but neither does it mean closing it off entirely. Regaining hope isn't a return to innocence. It's courage, the kind of courage that says, despite everything I've been through, despite all that's hurt, I still want to live truthfully. Even knowing that life offers no guarantees and that the future is never promised, you choose to trust again. And, more importantly, you trust yourself to handle what comes next. It's courage because, beneath all the scars, there's still a part of you that yearns to feel, to love, to engage, and to dream. Because it's in that vulnerability, in that small act of opening, that the soul begins to expand again. That's when life begins to come alive, not in grand gestures, but in quiet moments where you realize that, despite the pain, you are still here, and you are still capable of being moved. But here's the thing, not all pain ends when the event ends. Not all wounds close when the trauma stops. Some experiences, especially the ones that were never processed, continue to echo inside of us years later. They don't do this because someone insists on suffering, but because something that was never truly felt, never truly digested. It was never closed, never allowed to breathe. In these cases, the past isn't simply a memory, it becomes a presence. It lives within you. It clings to your skin like a shadow that no one else can see, a weight that no one else can feel. Only, the burden it places on your heart. For so long, you think you're walking through life alone, but the truth is you've been dragging the past with you, letting it define the steps you take. Jung's words ring true here. What we resist persists. Few things are as deeply resisted as psychological grief. Not the grief of death, but the grief of the things that were never meant to be, the things that didn't happen, the love that never lasted, the affection that was never returned, the childhood that was never fully lived, the quiet pain of all that could have been but wasn't. These invisible losses form chains that bind us to what is gone, but that still hold power over us. These past wounds aren't just memories, they are unfinished stories, fragments of experience that we carry as if they are part of us. We move forward, but the chains pull us back every time we try to take a step. The ego tries to push us forward, to get us to move on, to rationalize, minimize, deny, but the soul doesn't work that way. It needs time. It needs space. It needs the truth. Truth cannot rush, nor can it be ignored. Psychic grief only happens when there is room to feel, without judgment, without shame, without the urge to get over it. Letting go of the past doesn't mean erasing it. It means integrating it. It means looking at what happened, acknowledging that it hurt, that it marked you, and then allowing it to find a place within you, not as a fresh wound, but as a scar that tells a story, not of pain, but of survival, of growth, of transformation. It's not about forgetting, it's about accepting. It's about acknowledging that this part of your story, though painful, has shaped you, and now it can rest. This process is difficult, painful even, because it forces the ego to face the truth it's been hiding from for so long. It brings the soul face to face with the losses that have been buried under years of denial, But only when that grief is allowed to surface can the past stop haunting you. Only then do those old patterns, those emotional triggers, start to lose their grip on you. Only then do you stop letting past pain dictate your present experience. Fighting the past only keeps it alive. Resisting it keeps you stuck in it. But letting it go is a quiet act of courage. It's saying, I accept what was, but I no longer need to live from that. And in that moment, something changes. Not because the past disappears, but because it finally finds its rightful place. A place where it can exist without ruling over you. A place where it can sit as a memory, not a wound. When grief is allowed to process, the present becomes real. The present stops being a reflection of the past, and the future stops being a mirror of the wounds that once cut so deep. When you stop living from your pain, you start living from your possibility. As we reflect on the journey we've explored today, how pain can shape us, how strength and vulnerability go hand in hand, and how healing requires the courage to face our past and allow our wounds to find their place within us. It's clear that growth is not a destination, but a process. Every step we take, even in the quietest moments, is part of reclaiming our wholeness. So, I ask you, what have you learned from today's discussion? What's one thing you've discovered that you can bring into your life and practice from now on? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Share your insights with us in the comments below, and let's keep this conversation going. And if you enjoyed this video, please leave your comment below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Thank you for being part of this journey with us. Let's continue growing, learning, and healing together.